Hello everybody, and today we're painting a Welsh castle in Llanberis called Baldawen, if I pronounce it right, Baldawen Castle. Um, and what I'd like us to do is to work with number of techniques we worked in the last few sessions, using some runny paints and using some thick paints and working to lovely soft tones, so that we've got much more colors than we might have had recently with all our snowy scenes. So let's explore some of our colors as well. So first of all, I'm going to start with my sketch. So I have my oil mixture here, and I've got my turbs here. So I'll just start with the turbs, so my drawing will stay reasonably dry, not going to be too oily. So I'll put a tiny bit of white on my brush, and I'll start sketching today with one of the grayish type of color. So I'll go for one of my blues. So I've got a range of blues here, from cerulean to cobalt blue to ultramarine. And then if I want to go into more turquoisey blue, I have emerald green. And if I want to go to the warmer blue, I've got some violet. So I'll go for, just for my sketching colors, one of those blues. I went for ultramarine and some white. Okay, just to make it more neutral, and maybe a droplet of Payne's gray. I'll just have more, maybe blue is better. Okay, something what will be lighter than our board. So our board is primed with violet and ochre today to give a bit of depth. And let's have a look at the whole composition of the painting. First of all, as normally I'll find the line of the horizon, so where the mountains meet, maybe part of the castle, part of the green segment of the castle. So somewhere roughly, not halfway through, but lower. So I'll just give myself a gentle indication of that area. Okay, it's not going to be perfectly straight eventually as well. There is the castle is standing slightly raised surface. I will put the castle quite quickly. Now on the photograph it's almost central, but I want to move it a little bit more towards the right. And it is going to be slightly higher than our mountains. I will leave quite a lot of space for the sky. There's loads of drama going on in the sky. So I'm just going to make a box out of my castle here. And there are some other structures next to it, so I might just extend it on the left. Now it was one of the most painted castles in the 18th century, apparently, because it was just so romantically situated, so abandoned and so exciting in its location. Okay, so that might be some sort of structures for my ruins. And I also decide there is almost like a space where those ruins stay more on the highest point of that hill, of that raised area, and that's what I'll kind of again indicate, because that will tell me, is it going to be quite central, or can I have it's moved slightly off center? So that's going to be my rough base for it. Within that platform I can just work other walls and do other things afterwards. At the moment they're not as important. So that's going to be our almost like a pedestal for it all here. The wall's going to go further away. And then we've got this gorgeous rock, what the castle was built on, all these rock formations. So I'm going to emphasize it almost as important as, something there, as important as our castle, that grandeur, grand feature. And it all blends with the the green segments of the hill, but also they're quite rocky, quite strong defenses. So I'll just give it a rough kind of texture, not texture, the rough change of shapes, how those shapes will be coming in. So this is all tips and a bit of bluey gray. Okay. And then I can work into the shape of the mountains. So that's a lovely valley leading us to Snowdon. You can't quite see Snowdon. So again, I'm interested now in comparison the shape of the silhouette of the castle with the silhouette, dramatic silhouette of that V shape of the mountains behind. Let's have a look where that V shape is going to come. So at this stage, it's good to look at the photograph for maybe the shapes of the mountains, but where they're going to be against our castle, that will be our own personal decision. Okay, maybe somewhere there for me. And I think I might drop the mountain down and then maybe raise it elsewhere just to balance it and make it extra dramatic. Okay. And then this one, it's gonna go up as well somewhere there. Actually, I do still want to have loads of clouds in there. Maybe I will drop it slightly lower. There's a beautiful drama going on with the sky. Okay, so if I'll drop it a tiny bit lower, maybe that valley could be slightly further down. So once you see those shapes in front of you, that's when you can make those suggestions. My lines became quite wide, so actually I'm going to use them as a shape just to see, have I got the right silhouette for my mountains? Yeah, so now instead of looking at the line here, I'm looking at the silhouette of my darks left out. Maybe something like that. Okay. And then finally, I'll look at overall shape for the clouds. And the clouds has most interesting structure to them. They almost build in an oval shape, and we see one edge of them in a kind of in a gorgeous highlight. So if I draw the kind of the inner oval of the structure of my clouds, maybe somewhere there, and then it just goes further out, something like that. Okay, so I'm looking for that lovely line. Okay, there might be some other clouds on the side of it, so kind of supporting that line, but that's my major line. And that will be the line of my highlights in the clouds. And then the overall outer line of my clouds, I can see somewhere here. And it just narrows it down because of the perspective, because how they've been blown by the wind. And again, here we can just about see the edge of it. Obviously, the clouds are not going to be so perfectly in that band, but if we stick to an overall layout of them, so from this band of an ovalish shape, I can then create slightly more indentations for my shapes here, yeah, of the clouds. Might just even soften some of my strokes to create that pattern. Okay, and then some of them will be a bit more strong going light, and some of them will be a bit lighter, disappearing into the shadows, but that is going to stay overall. Just drags by the wind in there. So if I wanted to rub a few lines out, I'll just dip my kitchen towel in some tubes and just shape up that area. Okay. I'll just soften that line as well at the bottom, because we know that is going to be our fluffy end of the cloud. And on this, our sketch, maybe just tiny bit more line here. Looks a little bit on top of the mountain, but that's it. Then that's my drawing will be finished for our painting. So let's start with introducing some of the blues for our sky, and then work into the maybe warmer clouds, and then bring some of the darks into the mountains and work on the foreground. So for the sky, I'm going to start with some of the darker tones at the top of the painting. So I have some ultramarine and some cobalt blue. Just going to mix those two together. Small amount of white. I can use now some oil to soften your paint. We're going to try to go around our clouds as a starting point. Okay, so that looks maybe slightly darker than I want, so slightly lighter than I wanted it. On the other hand, I need to be careful. It might be the illusion that the blue is looking light against my violet background. Let's just do some of that one here. Okay, so there's some lovely movements of the clouds going from right corner downwards. So I'm going to try to do some of the strokes of my sky within that direction as well. I think I picked up a bit more stronger blue there. Sorry, white. So let's come back to if in some of the strokes I'll end up with more cobalt blue than ultramarine, that's fine. If in some I'll end up with more ultramarine and cobalt blue, that's lovely as well. So then we have that variety of color settling. Okay, so I'm going for all the darks at the top, maybe even shrink some of these clouds. So a variety of color will come with from our changing I'll just paint this corner and then clip it back. Okay, if it is too dark, we'll have to come back to it. Right, so I've done my darkest point of the sky. Now I'm going to start introducing tiny bit more blue and maybe cerulean blue, or maybe just extra white. It tends to, on a nice sunny day like the one in front of us, we tend to have more violety blues, ultramarine blues further into the depths of the sky, and close to the horizon we start having more cobalt blue, cerulean, turquoisey colors. It's not only the light but also the change of color there going to be happening. Now in the V shape of our clouds, I think I'm going to bring that V shape between the two white clouds, not focused, not in the center of my castle tower. So I had just changed my sketch gently to have that slightly moved left. Okay, tiny bit more white, and that part of the sky is getting slightly lighter. Okay, maybe back to a bit more cobalt blue. To have a nice depth next to our cloud. Okay. And let's paint some of this similar darkness of the sky, kind of that middle stage. We can see a little bit underneath of the cloud, kind of a bit more central. I think there is just loads of overcasted type of clouds, just quite grayish. So it keeps the sky slightly darker. And again, once we'll have our light tones, we'll find out if we're on the right track with our blue here, or if we need to lighten it up or darken it. But I can come close to my mountain now on the right hand side. So my mountain might be very similar in its darkness at the end. But the corner here on the left under our big cloud, I'm going to make it definitely lighter. So I'll have a drop of emerald green with my blue, because I want that sky to glow. So I've got more of a turquoisey blue now. And I want it to glow from underneath of our darker cloud here. To also make our mountain to stand out below it. Maybe a droplet of white. There's another little fluffy cloud there while I'm into those colors. And there's some of that gorgeous light. I'll persevere with my turquoise mixed color and another droplet of white just for this V shape. To see that light go into Penopass, up the Penopass. Okay, and now I'm going to gently, there's a nice edge to this light. It does tell us that there are quite nice dark clouds overhanging. But if I'll introduce tiny bit of light in the middle of this darker section, just something like that there, I think that's will merge it with the extra light on the left hand side of our painting here. But it's soft, so it doesn't look like it's jumping at us, yeah. And again, for now, that's looking good. We'll just add some more blue on the right hand side, and our other cloud. Okay, it's not as dark as the blue we had above, but not as light as in the center. It is difficult to judge it, so it's okay if you just think that's okay for now. We'll compare that color and we can adjust it at a later stage. Okay, and some of these colors are more of clouds colors rather than the pure sky, really. I'll just put a little bit of bluish color for our clouds to merge with them. I think my mountain's gone a little bit too low. Because then it makes me not just look at the shape of the mountain, but also tells me is this chunk of blue is of a good shape, because it just looks a bit of a silly shape, this blue. So maybe I have to extend it or shape it slightly different, or maybe find it's some support elsewhere. Okay. Any other sections we might have a little bit of that blue? I think that's okay. We'll just have to work with our clouds on that. And a bit more adjustment for my mountain edge here. Now I can start seeing its silhouette better. Okay. Slightly flatter. It's only when we start seeing those shapes together, we can start adjusting them. Okay, I think I make it a tiny bit flatter in this section as well. I think I can drop it. Lower for now. Okay. see how that stands when our castle is ready. Good. So our blues are now done. We can move on to do some clouds. Right, to do our clouds, I wipe my brush, but there's still a bit of blue within the bristles, but I'm not too worried about it. I'm gonna have a tiny bit of oil on my brush, and I'll go for some ochre and a small amount of violet. Now this looks quite dark, but I'm going to be interested in making a nice gray color, so a small amount of white, and I'm going to be back to my ultramarine. So the ochre and violet will give me some warmth for the cloud, and the ultramarine will cool it to more of a gray color. Okay, so it's not just that browny color, it's more of a grayish tone. So let's have a look. That's a nice one. So I'm going to start working for some of the darker sections of my shadows on the clouds. And just identify some of those segments. And that's when I'll know as well if I need to make part of the clouds darker or part of the sky darker. And in different areas, that will vary. So let's just block some of this in. Okay. Maybe some of it higher here. Now, leaving tiny bit of violet here at the background just tells me that my cloud will need to be much darker on that end. And bordering it with the sky, I think that's where my sky will have to be a little bit darker than my cloud. So look another side. Another side, the bottom part of the cloud looks quite lit up. So I'll go for stronger ochre with white and violet. So there's still blue present, but it's not as strong. So I think I can do my lit up with the sun cloud at the bottom here. One area above, I can add some more blue to it, maybe even stronger. So it will start looking slightly darker. So a bit more blue, a little bit more violet, a bit more both. Okay, that's a stronger, nice color. So same combination of the three colors, but on the top of this cloud, I'm going for more ultramarine. Then the rest. So this is quite a dark section of the cloud. It will stand out against the sky better here at the top. Once we'll add more white into the smaller flowing clouds, so the sky will start appearing slightly light into that corner. But for now, I'm going to keep it as it is. And I think the same color could go for some of these gaps we left in the sky for the clouds before again we'll start adding anything light to them. So if I'll make them slightly darker first, so then they've got some weight to them, but they're no longer just the background gaps. Okay, so they just have that back up in a way. And I'm going to make slightly more blue. Actually, maybe a shape here on that opposite cloud. Oh yes, well, we've got this more bluey version. I think the bottom of my cloud here could go slightly darker. Just very gentle contrast then with the sky. Just gives that weight to the clouds. And if we're smudging some of the blue into the cloud, that's all makes it extra exciting. So those colors interact together. Maybe that's something else here. That's the beauty of oil painting. One color can merge into another quite swiftly, quite easily. So we haven't done anything else into the tops of the clouds. And I think I'm going to add slightly more blue to all this mixture for the two small, quite bold shapes of the white clouds. They're right here next to the castle. I'm going to ignore the white, but I'm just going to build the overall weight by introducing this more of a bluey version of that gray. Okay, just to give it a little weight. You can paint slightly over the castle here. I can bring it back and this mountain as well. Okay, something happening there. Once we'll start introducing the whites, it will start making a massive difference immediately. Just gonna lower part of this blue maybe, so it's closer to the castle. Once again, little playful touches really of some of the ideas, variations. So that turquoisey blue, I think I could put a tiny bit more bolder. So it's just creeping through. We've gone too far. I want to break it down here in the middle. Okay. Let's keep it at that for the moment. And once you've filled up all your shadows for the clouds, again, we can wipe our brush. I just dip it in a bit of dips and then just wipe it on my tissue. So then all the muck is then in the tissue rather than my pot. Disturbs. And this time I'll go for some fresh white, whatever I've left on my brush, which might be a little bit of gray. And then a small amount of ochre before we go into the white. Okay. If you have your Napoli's yellow close by, that would be brilliant as well. We'll work with that shortly as well. If you don't have Napoli's yellow, You can mix it by adding just a bit more cadmium yellow to your ochre and just loads of extra white. So I think I'm ready. I'm going for a lighter version of ochre at the moment. I know some of my colors will start mixing, some of my dark shadows, the blues from the sky will start mixing. So it will not end up being a fresh color. But I want it to be mixed with other colors. So let's have some fluffy strokes. Maybe it's still quite bold. So I've taken some of the paint off my brush. So I'll have slightly less pigment. And let's just go and introduce some of that light gently. If it's too much paint on the brush, just keep wiping it. Quite like that nice dark shape there. And maybe leave some of the darkness. Maybe introduce another little patch of light. Okay, maybe wipe the brush off. My brush is traveling really excitingly because it merges with other colors next to the newly introduced light. So it just smudges. Okay, that's nice. Tiny bit more. So this is one of our central ones, but for now I'll work with it with the same color. There's one little shape to it, maybe another one, and another one. And let's just combine them gently together. Keep wiping my brush, and then I can smudge them in the existing shapes of the shadows. Okay, there is another similar. One little highlight in the center, kind of the main one. One on the left, and a little bit more elongated shape on the right. This one I can put down a bit more lower. So again, I haven't done the full light for these two central clouds yet. I'm just establishing them overall big shapes. If your color starts begin looking more into the blue, then into the warm color, maybe a small amount of ochre and some fresh white could be a good one. Or one that warms present. Okay. And let's find some highlights in our cloud on the left-hand side. They're underneath of our cloud or within the gaps of our cloud. It's kind of very broken into little shapes, kind of loads of holes in that cloud in that sense. And then there are some just outer layer highlights. I'll put them slightly bolder first, and I can smudge them. With our existing shadows. If you do the stroke, and it's a very pleasing one, keep it. Don't just follow me exactly. If something worked for you, be brave, stay brave to continue working with your development. Just adding tiny bit of white and maybe my pale blue or turquoise, what I have on my palette. Just want to have some light in this corner, but not, maybe not a white light. And then I'll start introducing some pale blue little strokes, just as a feel for them first. As little drags of highlights of the much higher clouds. Okay. Just little drags, very, very carefully. I think I'll do some of those drags on the right hand side of the painting, but I'll leave it much more as it is on the left hand side. So we've got that comparison. At any point you overwork it, I might just need to wipe the area and introduce some fresh blue, and then repeat the process. Maybe do some wait for part of the painting to dry. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to work with that. I'll touch up my shadow on the cloud. Okay, it's not quite a shadow anymore. So I need to make sure I'll wash my brush again. So I'll move my shadow back. Just introducing that violet oak and ultramarine back to rebuild one of my shadows here. It's becoming slightly pale or just losing its shape gently, so I'll just support my highlighted strokes. Okay. I think about now I'm ready to start putting some really exciting whites. Again, I'll need to wipe my brush quite like this corner. I think I'm going to keep it as it is. That's better. So I'll go for some fresh white and Napoli's yellow. And I'm not going to add any oil. I'll use quite thick paint. And I'll start with just introducing it for some of these key clouds here in the center. Just a little dab over. Just going to try to vary the strokes. So put 2-3 strokes. I'm loading the brush again, not because I'm running out of paint, but because the paint from the background makes my stroke slightly darker. Okay, so that's nice. Tiny bit softer. And then again, tiny bit of a highlights for another shape. Some of the lines are slightly wider, some of the lines are slightly narrower. I'll lead it slightly into the shadow. And maybe a couple of marks. Charging up again, so maybe fresh color. Having that hint of Napoli's white, Napoli's yellow. Make that gorgeous contrast with the blues. Okay, and the edge. Again, just keep maybe you're wiping the brush if you do lift some thicker, stronger pigment. You might just want to do one of the clouds. Don't have to do all of the clouds today. Or maybe just do a little bit on one. If you're not happy with it, leave it. Practice it on another cloud. Sometimes lifting slightly different pigment or spreading it differently teaches you how to work with the other shape. Okay, that's nice. And I think I want to bring some of that light, maybe with stronger amount of Napoli's yellow, maybe somewhere under my clouds. Maybe tiny bit of the line here, which I'm going to soften. But if I introduce a couple of shapes and then maybe use my finger or soft brush just to smudge it, it will give that glow. A beautiful glow. I like that. I like that a lot. I think I need a little bit of glow somewhere here as well. So maybe this shadow could be just slightly paler. And then I can go nice and bold and with extra yellow and white, or maybe just extra white here for some of the little marks. I'm just going to drag the brush and create some textures on top of some of these whispery clouds. Okay, just don't want streaks, perfect parallel streaks or similar thickness lines. So we're spending quite a bit of time on the clouds today. But the rest of the painting is going to be all in support of our clouds. So that's all. To rejoice our clouds and make them the key. That's nice. Okay, just don't want too many parallel lines, so if I fill some of this in. Smudge some of it. Some of the clouds are lovely, perfect for smudging and dragging. Just from time to time, pay attention to repetitive forms or repetitive marks. So fingers are important tools today. That lovely smudginess. Right, I'm going to do a couple of more lighter marks and I'm going to stop for the sky. Okay, let's stop at that. Beautiful. So for the foreground, we're going to work slightly differently. We're going to introduce some of the lighter tones first and use our background violets to support us. Okay, so I'm going to start with some of these paler grays on the rocky areas. So I'll go for any of my murky whites here, and I'll use small amount of ultramarine and some violet. So I'm going to go for a lighter version of our clouds, maybe a droplet of ochre. This is going to be much lighter straight away. So I'll go for some big chunks of light. I'm going to try to find some of those textures. Maybe just let the brush skim a little bit. Again, these are not our final strokes, but they allow us to explore our brush, to get a bit more practice into some of that texture. Sometimes you'll end up with a lovely texture and you will preserve it and keep it. Okay, so I'm looking for any other highlights, almost like on the top here. There's definite highlight on this edge. Okay. And these big slopes might be just catching a little bit more light. Or maybe just the lichen is just, that's what it is, a bit of both. A bit of light and a little bit of lichen growing. It's the top of the wall or a path or something. I think it must have been a broken wall, so we only see the base of it. Must have been part of the castle there, castle structure. Yeah, it gives us that perspective quite quickly. Now let's do the same, but increase some of the warmth. Maybe I'll go for slightly more ochre and violet. I wanted to work around the rocks, but I think I've got the color perfect here for my sunlit mountain on the right, on the left hand side. I think that's the one here. Maybe even stronger violet, so it's not competing with the shadow of our cloud. I think that will be a lovely, nice light. We'll make it slightly darker on the edges, but because we are within that range of color, that's don't want to lose that opportunity. We can add some more ultramarine as we did before. So that's our edge slightly. So that's again how the clouds will be interacting in color with our mountains. Can do a bit more of an interesting edge, slightly different terrain on them, and then merge with our existing maybe colors. Go slightly darker, more into the violet and ultramarine here. Quite like that more blue effect. merging towards the center, towards that V shape on the mountain. So I'm just varying that color. Okay, some of these structures of the castle could come on top. I'm going to focus on some of these mountains where I've got that color. I quite like the smudgy edge to it here as well. Maybe slightly more light. Okay, and then I can do maybe a tiny bit more sharpening edge as well. Okay, I'll keep it smudged because then I can introduce some fresh paler blue. I think that's what I'll do to make that contrast stronger. Okay, so that's will be my castle. So that my castle will need to be much darker. This means that I'll need to deliberately introduce something paler. So I need to be back to my ochre and violet and introduce some warmth on the bottom of that slope. So then the castle could stand strong. A hint of fresh violet. Let's make something a tiny bit more. That's even better. Okay, so that's I'm planning some of my darks to be strong, and I think that's also gives me an opportunity to lighten up. And that's why I ended up with the mountains, because I was led by some beautiful light on the mountain on the left hand side. Now I can add some of that extra light here. That's very much like a Welsh mountains colors now. There's all that heather and character of the shapes, the slopes. I'll put a tiny bit of that light, exaggerated light here as well. Then my castle got more of a benefit of the silhouette for it later on. And let's come back with some of the similar colors on the foreground. They're not as much warm tones on the foreground. There are small amounts, so I'm gonna go around some of my whites, just small hints of that same ochre, violet, a hint of blue, but more on the warm side. And then I'll fill the rest with much more cooler version of that color. I'll go the tops. I'm gonna keep the coolness for lower parts. It's kind of under the whites, under those shapes, fill in some of those gaps, and stain mainly at the top. So if there is any light touching up that area, that will be more on the top. Maybe somewhere there. But so far, I haven't really looked at the shapes any good. Just went to place some of the light more by the feel of it. And I can do it afterwards to change, make changes or adjust. Okay, so some of my warms, most of my warms are done. And now let's start working some of those shadows. So let's use the same color group. Whatever you've got left, maybe from your violet and ochre. But now let's introduce more ultramarine. And before we create all the shadows, I just want us to come around some of the smaller gaps we might have left, and maybe just fill most of them with that color. So it should be slightly darker than our previous more of an ochre and brown and violet color. So it needs to be slightly darker. We need to sharpen anything, we can do gentle sharpening. Although if we've been using quite a lot of oil, that might be a tricky thing to do. Just open up some of my color. So if I wanted something a bit more sharper somewhere here, this might not quite happen now. I might need to wait for it to be worked around with much more thicker layer. Okay, maybe just a little bit of darkness here. Okay, so maybe some more drags down, little gaps, little textural marks. We don't want these rocks to be very gentle, very soft. We want them to have some sharper texture. Okay, so as much as we're softening them now unintentionally, we're going to try to create maybe or bring back some of the angled lines, a bit more geometric marks. And we can also do them later when we'll do extra texture. I think that shape could be dark, more into the cooler tone. It's almost like roots, how that rock settled under them, under the soil. Only very light layer of soil there. Again, just open up the color. If I pick up too much ochre, I'll just immediately balance it back with some blue and violet. If you end up having too much light colors, pick up a piece of cloth and smudge your existing colors and kind of find the background. I think that's what I'll do shortly, to do some extra texture. That's quite light. Okay. So if I were to wash my brush, quite like this flat brush today. So if I'll just wipe it, clean it, and just use a little bit of oil on it, just fresh oil. I can find some of the sharpnesses of tone by just wiping off the background color. Sorry, wiping to the background color. I keep wiping my brush because the other colors keep running into it. Some of those lines can be returned. If I'll do the whole tissue, that might be less precise. I need more tabs or oil or both. Okay. I'll just stop at that for the moment. And let's introduce some of our green. So then we know how much of the highlights we need to preserve and focus then on our shadows. So green is going to be very exciting. I'm going to use olive green. It's quite a yellowish type of green with some white. I think that's just perfect there. Because it is quite a yellowish in color. Against the violet, it will really glow. So let's find some of them. I can make some stronger greens later. Just want to come back with some of the highlights before they all get disappeared. Before they disappear under the other tones. Let's find some of that space around. Maybe a little bit stronger green. Somewhere there. So I'm working, looking for little patterns of light of the flat areas there. If you need to add slightly more emerald green. That becomes quite fluorescent really. So I think I'll add some violet to it. And I can do some more cooler blue for some of the shadows. You can see tiny bit of them, maybe valley, sloping, well maybe, yeah, I think it's a valley going below, followed a small amount of green there. It would be a nice reference what's behind. And I'm going to vary now some of this green from light to slightly darker, from olive green on its own to olive green with some white to olive green with some violet. The top layers of green will remain white and quite sunny, yellowy green. Okay, so those are nice big chunks. I haven't decided if I need to change them. So far I'm just blocking them. I haven't looked at the shapes yet. So far again I just went with the color glowing. Okay, I think that color glowing could be under the castle. Maybe somewhere here, slightly bigger stroke. I don't like that slopey one. And I like the nice lichen of a similar color here. Maybe even Naples yellow is that. Olive green. So lichen. It's a contrast with our shapes. Maybe I'll put some more reference to similar shapes elsewhere here. We'll charge up the surface. Maybe there's some bits of grass there as well coming through, but that unites the rock and the greens together. And then I have a shadow where the grass is. So I'll go for my emerald green and some violet as before. And let's create more of a darker version green. I just wanted to make sure it belongs to the surface here. I don't want it to jump out of a shadow. Maybe a little bit of light here. That's where that softness is graceful. Okay, it's a bit reflecting there for you. Not. There's almost like a little step here where we have slightly lighter tone, more yellowish tone at the top, then it's going more into the darker green. And again, maybe a little highlight at the base, so that's step change. So I'm going to put a slightly small amount of white. Maybe it's more cooler blue reflected into that grass. Might not be as much highlights. So some of the shadows need to be sharpened in there. Okay, you can see it might be better this way. Okay, so let's do the shadow slightly stronger. So that's my darker green. So it's emerald green with some violet. I don't have any oil on my brush, just pure pigment, and it just slides through the surface and still kind of merges with the colors, but at the same time keeps some of the darks in place. And then I'm ready to finish off the painting with the castle and some of the shapes of the mountains and a bit of sharpening of the texture of the broken kind of constructions and a bit of shadows of the foreground. They will have very similar colors there. Right, let's work now on some of the darker tones of the castle and the mountains and the shadows. I would like to start with the castle. Now, if my mountains are going to have more warmth in them, then I need to make a decision that my castle will have to have more coolness in it. So I think I'll go for my key colors. I've been using the violet and ultramarine. On their own, they just look too blue, too violet-y. So a droplet of ochre still has to be there. To make them slightly stronger, so I think that's probably going to be the color. To make them slightly stronger in darkness, I can have a droplet of Payne's Gray, but I need to be careful not to just end up with a black color. Castle might still have some nice lighter tones, but for starting point, so I might preserve some of the existing violets, but let's introduce some of the darknesses. Now, first of all, on top, I'll make it nice and cool, as it will contrast with our sky. There's a window, so let's just make all that opening slightly darker again. There's a nice broken edge to the castle. Don't have to have perfect shapes for it, for the silhouette, because the edges of the castle are not perfect. They have got broken brick, stone. So let's put that line slightly stronger. Okay. I think because of the perspective of my camera how it's positioned. Looks like the castle is getting wider towards the bottom, but I am making vertical lines for the castle. I think that's gone maybe a bit too low, but let's come back to it in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to preserve some of that violet light. I like that violet in it. Okay, I lost my window, but I've got that nice soft edge to it. I can bring the window back. And the right hand side of the castle has a nice soft highlight on it. So I'm going to make it, just smudge it gently. Just a tiny bit of pale blue in that area. I think again it's probably the light from the sky gives it that cool highlight. Okay. Well, I can have a fresh brush to remove some of the, well, I want to see some of that violet from underneath. I want to blend some of my bluey grays just with some transparent. Want to see the background in there. Okay, that looks better. Now I can put maybe my window, my darker window. Very elongated, very character. I think it's a big archy type of window. I'll put a little light for it as well in a short while. Okay. Let's put a little bit of light, ochre and violet with a small brush. So I'm going to do something above it, almost like a triangle gothic light. Just within that shape, it's not exaggerating it too much. And also there is a droplet of light, pale blue, droplet of that sky color coming into the surface of the edge of our castle. Otherwise, it just looks a bit too perfect in its shape. So I'm going to do a tiny bit of a droplet. There may be some of the stone missing, maybe a little sharpness to the edges there. Okay. That's good. I'm happy with that. And now let's have the walls done around it. I'll use the same bluey, gray, bluey, violet gray to introduce some of that darkness next to some of these walls. So I just need to create a little bit of tension in few places. Quite like some of the highlights from my initial sketching lines. So possibly I might leave some of them out. They're quite shallow, some of these walls, because they've been, first of all, taken apart to rebuild, well, to build Carnarvon Castle. So some of the stones were taken away, or something else maybe build out of it. So they're quite shallow. And the second one, they're reasonably far away. So they will appear more as thinner lines. That's lovely. So thinner lines, and then maybe part of this one's gonna come up. So it almost appears like a strange romantic labyrinth. All these walls going slightly wider, slightly narrower. Okay, this highlight, I like it, but I think it's might be too strong. Might just leave it for the moment. Right, any other dark shapes more immediately to be seen? So my ultramarine is quite nice and strong. I'll make some of these ones a tiny bit more sharper. Especially at the base. I need to come back to my mountains, otherwise there's shapes not reading well. I'll just sharpen any of the other textures around our rocks. So this time I'll go for Payne's Grey and Ultramarine. It will be very dark on the brush, but once introduced into the painting, the colors will start showing its true color. So they're much more bluey. So becoming stronger. Okay, a bit more sharpness to it. Some more shadows, just with some rougher, more bolder lines. Okay, that's good. Go slightly lower. So I'm doing a couple of dots, couple of marks, couple of strokes of different lengths, and introducing them very lightly over the surface. Keep loading my brush. So the light's not just smudging into the area here. I think I can cover some of these ones now. Some of these gaps. I'm gonna have a couple of trees here, so use the same brush. I just dry it on my tissue, and I'm going to do some trees here by just rubbing a dry Payne's Grey and ultramarine, and then droplet of tubes of oil, just to drag some of the marks out for the tree trunks here. That's be quite nice for the trees. Some light falls through it. Just using a hint of gray. The trees, and then let's finish some of our mountains, the rest of our mountains. Some more. I think I'll just mainly merge the new color I'll be introducing. So I want violet, ochre, and ultramarine, but I'm going to introduce it quite runny and blend with my background colors. All I'm interested in from my new color is sharper edge, maybe at the top, and all the rest I'm going to blend, okay, a tiny bit lighter. To see where the walls are going to be here. Okay, so the walls are a bit soft now. I'll have to make them slightly sharper, maybe with the highlights on top of them, maybe a bit of both, maybe some extra sharper contrasts of shadows. Just finish this as well with a darker tone. That's beautiful, soft finish to the base of the mountain. I think I can do it with a shadow here. I'll put some lovely lights, but I think the shadow will be quite nice here as well. Right, I think I'm going to put one more highlight on the grass. Now I can see where my darks spread, and I will stop and reflect over the next day or so if the painting is finished or need another little touch. But I think so far the atmosphere is there and the painting is quite solid in its colors and its shape. So I want a bit of personal touch. Okay, more green. And just white. Yeah. And small amount of that color. Just love that light coming between the two walls. That just charges things up. Same like maybe how the shadows from the clouds moving along the land Just gives that movement of light throughout. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. I think I'll stop at that now. So we have the softness of the sky contrasted with some of the darks on the foreground, and most importantly supporting the castle, how it's all coming together and uniting it all together in the middle ground.